Hello and welcome to HFMA Talk, the podcast for NHS Finance. I'm Mark Orchard, Chief Financial Officer at Portsmouth Hospitals University NHS Trust. This episode continues our series of conversations where I get to talk to some of my current and former NHS colleagues, working across all sectors and geographies, right across the UK and beyond. And today, we have a very special episode where we get to meet our incoming HFMA National President, Owen Harkin. Now, Owen, as many of us will already know, has already served as Vice President for the Association for over the last 3 years and has been National Trustee on the UK HFMA Board for over 6 years. Owen's day job is the Director of Finance and Estates, as well as the Deputy Chief Executive Officer for the Northern Health and Social Care Trust in Northern Ireland. Owen, thank you for joining us, and a huge warm welcome from HFMA Talk. How are you doing today, Owen?
Very well, thank you. It's a Monday, start of a long week, and I'm starting to get more and more ready and prepared for the upcoming role as President of HFMA. So it's starting to take over my life. I remember you saying that it really does start to take over your life, and it's starting to happen already, but I'm really looking forward to it at this stage.
Oh, fantastic, Owen. Let's start with your backstory, Owen. So you took up your current role as Director of Finance and Estates within the Northern Health and Social Care Trust over 6 years ago now, 2015. And you've also assumed the role of Deputy Chief Executive since back end of last year, before COVID, beginning of 2020. You were a graduate of the University of Ulster, began your career in the Finance Department of the Western Health and Social Care Services Board in Derry in 1988, progressing through a series of finance roles within the health service across Northern Ireland, and then had a 6-year spell as CFO in the education sector from 2004, before returning to health and social care in 2010. Now, one of the things that I know to be true about you, Owen, from our time working on the HFMA Board of Trustees together, is that you've always had a long-standing interest in finance team development. So can we start maybe with you telling us a bit more about how you got into NHS finance in the first place? And in particular, can you draw out perhaps, any support you got in your early days?
I suppose I got into NHS finance really because it was the first significant opportunity that I saw post-graduating from University of Ulster in 1988 that got me into the field I wanted to be in, which was management accounting. If I'm being honest, I didn't have particular interest in debits and credits, etc., but I was much more interested in management accounting, how you could advise and forecast and make a difference on a day-to-day basis. So I saw a job for what they used to call a general administrative assistant, close to a band 4 these days, in the finance department in Derry, which was my home city, in 1988 in management accounts, and I applied and was luckily successful. As regards where I went from there, I was very fortunate in that the group treasurer, as they called it then, was very supportive of anyone who was interested in securing qualification and developing themselves from there. And also at that time, in the late 80s, there was a much more increased focus on having qualified accountants and growing your own qualified accountants back in the day. I think we're going full circle in that at the moment as well within the service, especially in Northern Ireland here. So I was very fortunate that the board and the assistant treasurer supported me to do day release, again back at the University of Ulster, to do my qualification for CIMA.
Right.
So I did day release over 2 years with CIMA and secured that in early 1991. So that is something I owe to the health service, absolutely. And that's an area I've been in since. From there, I took some control of my career from about 1991 on to try and develop that a bit more and expand my horizons a little bit. And that's why I finished up in 91, moving from Derry to Belfast and working there for about 2 years before coming back to Derry in 95. If I'm being honest, the main reason to come back to Derry in 95 was a sideways move at that stage as an assistant treasurer. But I was just about to get married. I met my wife through the health service before we moved to Belfast, and I moved back just as we were getting married. So started our family in Derry, and we're still living in Derry, although I've continued to move around Northern Ireland in my various roles.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Listen, for those of us that are less familiar with the health and social care setup in Northern Ireland, it might be worth you just spending a little bit of time telling us about how the services are currently managed in Northern Ireland, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. In Northern Ireland, we have one regional commissioner. We don't have CCGs, etc. We have one regional commissioner, currently, I should say. That's called the Health and Social Care Board. They're supported by the Public Health Agency. And within the Health and Social Care Board, they have 5 commissioning groups, local commissioning groups, on a geographic basis across the 5 patches in Northern Ireland. And they commission services from the trusts. And in trust-wise, we have 5 geographic trusts across Northern Ireland. Hence, I'm in the Northern Health and Social Care Trust. There's 4 others, and on top of that, we have one other trust, which is the Northern Ireland Ambulance Service. Obviously, it's a regional service. There's various other non-departmental bodies that support that. There's one other significant organisation from our point of view, which is the Business Services Organisation, who provide a lot of the support services to the trust, be that payroll, HR, recruitment, legal services, procurement, etc. So they're a fairly large organisation too, and provide that support service to ourselves.
Am I right in saying, so your trust, the Northern Health and Social Care Trust, as you say, is one of 5 geographical trusts covering Northern Ireland. So just give a feel of scale for our listeners here. So I believe your trust is responsible for health and social care services to the population of about 470,000 people.
That's correct, yeah.
Employ about 12,000 staff. You have an annual turnover of just under £1 billion. So these are big scale operations.
It is indeed, and it's the full range of health and social care. Obviously, we run 2 acute hospitals in Antrim Hospital and Causeway Hospital across our patch. If people know the geography of Northern Ireland, we're responsible for the entire northeastern quadrant of the Northern Ireland map, from Lough Neagh, that big hole in the middle, which is Lough Neagh, up as far as the north coast and the Causeway Coast and Glens. So we also border in the south, right and very close to urban Belfast. So we have a wide range. We have the largest population in Northern Ireland. We also have the oldest population on average in Northern Ireland, because a lot of our population tend to retire to the north coast, etc. So that tends to be another challenge for us, and it's a very rural area. So we go from urban to rural, and from young to old. We have, as I say, we do acute services, obviously, but we do the full range of services, including mental health services, small amount of learning disability service. Obviously, care in the community care is a big issue for us, care for particularly our elderly population. And also, I suppose, the biggest departure for us, we have health and social care. So a big aspect of our services is children's services, and where we have that legal responsibility as a corporate parent for looked after children across our patch. And we also support them the likes of domiciliary care and care homes, and both nursing and residential care homes. So it's quite a wide gambit of services across, and we're organised across 5 service directorates, who are then supported obviously by corporate directorates such as finance, HR, business planning, etc.
So the full scale, in terms of integration, it's the full scale of health services, with the exception of ambulance services, I suppose.
With the exception of ambulance services, and I suppose the big area that's not part of us is primary care. Our particularly our GP colleagues, we work very closely with them, and probably as when colleagues in England talk about integration, I suppose they talk a lot about the integration between health and social care. Our biggest challenge is probably just to further develop our relationships with our primary care colleagues. And in the Northern Trust, we started that about 3 years ago. Our former chief executive developed a prototype initiative to drive forward a partnership with our GPs. That is very much a work in progress. It's something that's starting to work for us, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. We find ourselves building that trust with our GPs. So you find yourself looking for the small wins to deliver that show that we're listening to them and working with them, meeting their needs, and developing that relationship. A lot of the challenges about building that trust and showing we can work together for the good of our local population. So we're driving that forward at the moment. When I said right at the start about the Health and Social Care Board is currently the commissioner, we are going through a change at the moment whereby the Health and Social Care Board is due to close at the 31st of March 2022. And one of the processes we're going through, not that dissimilar to England, is that reorganisation. What does that mean for us? A lot of the staff and the functions of the Health and Social Care Board will move into the Department of Health as a regional group. But the regional group are now looking at establishing area integrated partnership boards where there will be that cooperation and from an integrated care system point of view between the trusts, primary care, community and voluntary sector, and local authorities also. They're still working through that, trying to work out what the accountability arrangements will be, what the performance arrangements will be, and also, very importantly, what the funding arrangements will be, whether it'll be done on some capitation basis or whether we'll deliver services on just a block contract incremental basis as we go forward. So it's very much a work in progress, but it's something I think we can learn from each other across the 4 countries of the UK at the moment, given the various positions we're currently in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you're keen to learn across the 4 nations as well. Perhaps this is something we'll come back to later on in the podcast, Owen. Okay, I said at the start we wanted to find out a bit more about you, Owen, and you've already mentioned that you met your wife when you both worked in health and social care in Derry during those early years of your career. So congratulations on that. And I understand you've got two not young anymore, children as well.
I have 2 children. I have a son, Liam, who's 24. He's a finance graduate, but as when everybody hears that, they think he's another accountant. He's not. He's working in one of the finance houses in Dublin at the moment. Right. So he's very much in the stocks and shares and such like stuff I don't fully understand at all, if I'm honest. But he's loving it. And while he's working for a Dublin firm at the moment, because of COVID and the pandemic and lockdown, etc., he's actually working from home. So him and his girlfriend are living very close to home at the moment, back in Derry. The rent's a lot cheaper there than in Dublin. So he's loving that at the moment, but he's due to go back probably sometime during 2022. He just doesn't know when yet, you know. My daughter Grace is 18, just turned 18, and she's doing her A-levels this year. So she's been through that period of COVID where she has never done a formal exam, and I think that's going to be a challenge for that entire age group. In fact, I think that's the age group I feel most sorry for as regards the whole lockdown process. They missed out on a lot, the rite of passage of teenage years, etc. So I think the danger is there might be a lot of catching up to do, but we'll see how that goes in the next few months and years.
Yeah, I feel a bit of that. My eldest is in his GCSE year this year, and of course they've missed out on so much learning. Yeah, and there's a little bit of catching up to do this year before they get into their exams next year. So he's being assessed to death at the moment. Bless him. So I understand all that. I understand you still live in Derry, and that must give you a commute back and forth work of about 120 miles round trip every day.
That's correct, spot on. You've done a lot of research, Mark. Yeah, it's exactly 120 miles round trip, door to door. But actually, I find that good. I think I remember Sandra mentioning something similar about it during her podcast with you, Mark. I find that gives you the opportunity to switch off a little bit on the evening, of an evening on your way home from work. So I don't tend to leave work until quite late because I know once I get home I've switched off. So I tend to monitor emails just at that stage. So my working day, I tend to arrive at work sometime around about leave home most mornings about between 7 and 7:15. And home most evenings around 7:15. So that's during the week. That's obviously quite a commitment, but that's what goes with the territory. I have to say, I find the commute useful from that point of view. It allows you to have that separation between work and life, and allows you to just be a bit more relaxed once you do get home.
Let's get into your HFMA year if we can. Big year ahead. We said at the start you've been trustee now on the HFMA board since 2016, as you've been on the board for 5 years. You've been vice president for 3 years. You got involved, I think, in the HFMA in the mid-90s. You've chaired the Northern Ireland branch. You've had spells as branch treasurer. You've also served on the National Policy and Research Committee. So HFMA credentials clearly flow through your blood, Owen. So that's fantastic to hear that. At the time we're recording this, you said earlier on, we're back end of November now, so just a few weeks off you taking on your role as the UK National President for HFMA. So there's so much talk about your vision and so on, but how does it feel, before we get into the detail, how does it feel to be embarking on your presidential year? You're going to be the 71st leader of our wonderful association. You're only the 5th leader to come from the devolved nations and only the 2nd to come from Northern Ireland, of course, following in the footsteps of Paul Cummins back in 2002-03. So, before we get into the detail, how does it feel?
I have great pride in it. I do. It feels like it's an absolute honour. I was thinking about this recently. My late mother came to mind, actually. My mum, I used to, when I was working. When my mum was alive, I used to visit her every Saturday afternoon. And one Saturday, not long after I got the job, actually in the Education Authority, it was my first permanent Director of Finance role back in 2004. I arrived down to my mum one Saturday afternoon, and she said, and I don't say much about what my job is or what my title is. She just knew I worked in finance and worked in the health service, and I moved to education. She didn't know or care what I did. And I arrived in one day, and she says, "Tell me this: what do you actually do in OMA?" which is where I was working at that stage. And I says, "What do you mean?" She says, "Well, what do you do? I know you work in finance. Well, what's your job title?" I said, "Well, my job title is Director of Finance." And she went, I met a friend of hers in the supermarket the week before, and this friend's husband used to work in the Education Authority. And she said, "Oh, I hear Owen has got a massive job in OMA." So I says, "Yeah, well, some people might call it a massive job. Okay. I'm Director of Finance." And she went, "I'm very proud of you, son, but don't mess it up." So I feel the same. I have great pride in it, but I sincerely intend to do the very best I can from it, because I do recognise what an honour it is. I do recognise also I'm following on foot of some massive individuals in their support to the HFMA over the years, and not least Paul Cummings. I worked directly with Paul when I did come back to health. It's one of the reasons I did come back to health in 2010. And Paul was a great leader, in my opinion, of HFMA back in the day in 2002-2003, when we were a much smaller organisation and we're growing at pace, and he played a big part in that.
I know you've said previously, you clearly know the Northern Irish health and care system best, but I've also heard you say that you fully intend on being the president and therefore the leader of the whole association. So can you just say a bit more about that, and how you're going to ensure that you're kind of best placed to represent the whole four nations' interests as being HFMA president?
Well, as I say, I'm very, very aware that I'm coming from a Northern Ireland background. I don't know the detail and probably don't know some of the politics of the various aspects of health across the other three nations. I'm very comforted, however, by the fact that I have a magnificent board of trustees around me who will certainly keep me right and advise me. And also Mark Knight will, I'm sure, also keep me well guided on that. And of course, HFMA, we know, have a magnificent research branch under Emma Knowles as well. So I know Emma's been a superb help to me from a Northern Ireland point of view, as well as from a national point of view since I joined the Board of Trustees. So that gives me great comfort. I also am very aware, obviously, that HFMA, the challenges faced by the members of HFMA are very similar across all four nations, no matter what our structures may be, and no matter what reorganisations we may be going through. The day-to-day challenges we have are very, very similar, as became very clear, I suppose, during the pandemic. And I remember 19 months ago, we were all in the midst of debates around procurement and around PPE, etc. And our WhatsApp group, from a HFMA point of view, was bouncing with people seeking advice and getting that advice and support. So I know I can rely on that again going forward. From that point of view as well, we've recently set up the HFMA Celtic Nations group again, just to have a look at what we can do to learn together across the three Celtic nations, but also pull in expertise and views from the English NHS as well. And we had our first meeting back in November there in Cardiff, where we had senior finance representatives from both the branches and the senior leaders from the various departments of health, as well as some of the major organisations within the various Celtic nations. And I think that gives us some real opportunities to work forward on how we can help each other meet the challenges that we're faced with, be they digital, be they how we do performance management, or how we develop ourselves to make sure we're in the best possible place to take forward things like population health or use the population health data to make the best possible decisions for our public going forward, as well as just looking at the various financial funding streams, etc., and doing comparisons and the various researched opportunities that Emma and the team will no doubt identify. So I think there's a real exciting opportunity for us there to develop that vision across the whole of the UK and share that.
I'm really enthused to hear you talk about this new HFMA Celtic Nations group, and of course, linking that in with England as well as the four nations. let's get into then your presidential theme. What is it, and what can we expect of the association perhaps over the coming months and year ahead?
My presidential theme is entitled Reimagining the Future. And I see that under three categories. First one is to try and reimagine the future in the short term. What are the challenges we're all facing in the immediate time scale, getting over the crisis we currently have, getting ourselves and the system back on its feet? And secondly, looking at the longer term then, what does the NHS need to develop? How do we need to move forward? And what changes do we do and how can finance support that? And then thirdly, trying to reimagine the future for HFMA as an organisation. We've been through enormous change ourselves as an organisation in the last year. And I take this opportunity to say a massive thanks to Caroline Clark, who's been our president for the last 2 years. When the pandemic struck in March 2020, that had massive repercussions for HFMA, as you well know and as members are well aware. And we had a significant financial loss in that year. We took the opportunity to ask Caroline to maintain her role as president for a second year to give us some continuity and stability through that turbulent time. We also had the magnificent senior team in HFMA who helped us stabilise and work through that over that period. And it's great to be able to report that this year that we have now got ourselves into a healthy surplus for 2021 and are moving forward from that. But I have to say, Caroline in particular was a real stabilising force for that, as well as her normal energetic self, and bringing forward those initiatives and taking forward her theme of taking pride in the future, which really did resonate with members during that whole time as well. As well as, of course, obviously Caroline is also chief executive of one of the largest health systems in the country, and at the same time was being followed around by cameras for the BBC hospital programme, which I personally also found has been a magnificent representation of the health service. It certainly covered a lot of the challenges that I was dealing with at that time, and losing sleep over oxygen, etc. I often joke I've been 30 years in finance and I never lost sleep over money, but I did lose sleep over oxygen. I have to be absolutely honest. And so Caroline, as I say, I think has really helped in that role to describe the challenges facing the health service, but in her role as president of HFMA has really helped to stabilise the organisation, and I'd like to thank her for that.
Owen, I'd just like to echo that as well, actually. I think a historic 2-year term as HFMA National President. Caroline Clark has been absolutely brilliant leader for the association. As you say, no pressure, Owen, but massive boots, massive boots to fill there.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely, and I'd echo everything you said about Caroline. But let's get back to your year. So reimagining the future. Tell us a bit more about maybe what we can expect to see in terms of maybe your ask of members. What can we expect from you, Owen?
Well, as I say, there's three aspects to my theme. The first one is reimagining our future in the short term. As we all know, as I said earlier, we have common challenges, be that winter pressures, patient flow through our hospitals, be that ambulance arrivals, flow through the hospitals, and discharge through the back door into social care settings. We're all faced with the same challenges. We have slightly different approaches given the different structure in Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK, but certainly that's a significant challenge for us. We also have waiting lists are growing. Northern Ireland is probably the worst placed as regards waiting lists across the whole of the UK, but we're all have that difficulty. We have the new financial regime coming in April 2022, and also obviously the establishment of integrated care systems. So there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's the restructuring of the commissioning role in Northern Ireland as well. So there's monumental changes happening in the next year, and I think HFMA have a role to play in supporting our members through that process. Not just the technical advice, etc., but also as a support network for our colleagues. I'm very aware that in England at the moment there's change happening particularly from our commissioning care group colleagues, and I think there's a role for HFMA to support our members and ourselves through that process, and as friends and colleagues in that network to support our colleagues at all levels that they face with whatever challenges they face, be they financial, structural, or indeed personal, as they go through that change. And I think HFMA is superb at that, as I mentioned earlier. WhatsApp groups, support groups, but mentoring, coaching, that help has to be there for HFMA. So that's one of my asks this year, is that our members continue to play that key role in supporting each other through the challenges of particularly the next 12 months.
And I understand we're about to under your leadership, Owen, we're about to embark on a new 3-year plan for the association to plot, our bold, exciting future for HFMA. So could you just say a bit more about how you're going to get branches and members engaged in that process so that it's a fully inclusive sort of process of resetting our vision for the future?
I can, sure. For HFMA, as I say, I think that we need to also reimagine the future of HFMA as an organisation. We've been through the turbulent times of 2020 and 2021, now stabilised and in a much better place, as I said earlier. But the first item we need now is, well, so where do we go from here? We need to develop a new 3-year plan for HFMA, which will hopefully build a bold and exciting future for the organisation. And we need members' involvement and support to develop that, because it has to be a strategy we can all sign up to. There are many parts to that strategy that are already being worked upon. For example, the Education Subcommittee that I have chaired in the last year has done a review of qualifications, and I'm pleased to say that those changes will start to come into force with the January intake. And we're looking at repackaging the qualifications to take account of integrated care as well, and bring the primary care and the trust aspect of the qualifications together in a much more regular way. Another part of our strategy obviously has been to find a new home for HFMA. It's great to see we've now secured a base at Broad Plain in Bristol. And I think that's a real statement that HFMA is here to stay, and we're here to continue to be the leader for the healthcare finance. And I think the point for me now as regards to that is, so we are the representative body for NHS finance. How do we use that voice, and who should we be speaking to in doing so? So you're in conversation series is an example of that, where we try to engage the leaders from across the UK, and I think that's a brilliant example of what HFMA can do. But we also need to think about how we use that voice going forward. Do we try to be a bit more edgy, a bit grittier, but perhaps even disagree with government policy on occasion? While we do a lot of work for the NHS and we have a great relationship with the NHS, we also have to reserve our right to speak that truth unto power. And that has to be an important part of our future strategy. And I know you set a big target in 2017 of managing to get around all 13 branches. I promise to do my absolute best. I can't guarantee I'll match it given the logistics from Northern Ireland, but I will try my best to get around them all.
Oh, fantastic. And reimagining the future. So, as you said, retaining what's worked well, restore what we missed, renew in the light of learning the last 18, 20 months or so, and then reimagining what we wish for the future, including what we wish for the future of our association and how we continue to influence through a new 3-year plan. Owen, that sounds really exciting, and I look forward to, supporting you and hearing more about that as we unfold into the year. So before we let you go, Owen, I wondered if I could unleash on you my usual quickfire fun round. Are you happy to enter the quickfire round?
Yeah, give it a go. Let's hope it will shock too many people.
Okay. First question for me. What were you doing right before this conversation?
What was I doing right before this conversation? I was just on a call. My chief executive was off for a couple of days. So I was on a call with the regional chief executives, all 6 chief executives that meet. They meet. This started probably at COVID, where the chief executives just dropped on a call once a week just to touch base. Where are we? How are things going? They've maintained that throughout, and it's still ongoing at the moment. We're obviously now focusing a lot on winter and what are the challenges facing us. I don't know how it feels in England, but Mondays are very extremely busy days for us, and there's a lot of discussion happens across the 5 trusts as to how we can manage that, particularly very importantly with our ambulance colleagues, and how we can sort of smooth and manage the arrival of ambulances across our various sites across all 5 trusts. So that's very much a partnership approach that we have going all the time. So I was representing Jennifer, my boss, on that this morning, or just before this meeting. I have to say, as you mentioned earlier, I took on the Deputy Chief Executive role in March 2020, and I'm so glad of that. It's been really fascinating to just go that next step from being Executive Director of Finance to being involved in all that, the full range and raft of issues that are facing the Trust on a day-by-day basis. And it really is a fascinating time to be involved in that. So that's what I was at in the hour before I joined you.
So if you could go back in time to when you were, say, 18, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
Don't worry about things. Things will always work out. I think an 18-year-old self, first of all, I'll say don't drink as much as you did back then. But also develop your own confidence. Don't allow other people to stunt your own development. So yes, be respectful at all times, but understand your own capability and seek to expand and stretch yourself at all times. So I always found over my career, and that was an example, that's even in my 5 years in the Northern Health and Social Care Trust, I joined as Director of Finance. Within a year, I'd been asked to take on the estates portfolio. I did that, and 4 years, and then 4 years later, I took on the Deputy Chief Executive. I think it's important to continue to develop and stretch yourself. You mightn't necessarily change job title or change role, but look at opportunities to stretch, and your career will automatically develop from there. So don't worry too much about a career plan. A lot of people talk about a career plan. I don't think I ever had a career plan. As I said, I didn't even have a plan to go into the NHS at the time I did. But just make your own judgment calls and take control of your career at various stages. I think we were similarly affected by restructurings as have happened regularly in England as well. And I think that my advice to anyone in that situation is don't wait for someone else to do something to your career. Take control of it yourself. So that would be my advice.
Take control. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, thank you. Interesting. This is the 6th HFMA Talk in Conversation podcast that we've had so far, and not one person has had a career plan, and neither did I, by the way. So there must be something in that. Okay, so outside of your day job, Owen, what makes you happy?
What makes me happy? Well, my wife would say it's football. Watching Derry City, who are my local League of Ireland club. I'm a season ticket holder with them. Or Manchester United, which is very difficult at the moment. I don't want to particularly talk about that today, Mark. We've just changed our manager, I'm told. So we'll wait and see how that goes. So I'm a football fanatic. So my wife would say that. But what makes me happy, I would say it's just time with the family. As I said earlier, my working day is 7:15 to 7:15 practically. So the weekends are very important to me. So what makes me happy is spending time with my wife and with my family when they're around. 18 and 24-year-olds don't tend to want to be around that much. But when they are around, I really enjoy having time with them. And also then planning holidays. That's the other thing. I always like to have something to look forward to. That's been much more difficult with the pandemic, obviously. At the moment, we have a break planned for February. Fingers crossed it'll all come off and nothing will change between now and then. So that part of it I'm looking forward to. So I like to have something to look forward to. I like travelling, and that makes me happy with my family. Yeah.
Outside of what you do for a living on a day-to-day basis and everything you're going to do for HFMA over the next year, if you could do anything for a day, any job in the world, what would you love to do?
I think I just named it, manager of Manchester United.
Are you available?
Oh, I am. And it'll be very reasonable as well. I don't think it would cost $7 million to pay me off, put it that way.
Excellent.
I'm like everyone else, one of those experts. If I could actually have a job for a day, I suppose I wouldn't mind having a go at being First Minister of Northern Ireland for a start. I don't know whether I think I would need about 10 like-minded people alongside me, though, and that might be the challenge in Northern Ireland. Because I think there's things that we could be doing, especially I think Northern Ireland, from a health point of view, we're the size of one integrated care system. We should have a massive opportunity to make a massive difference. And if we can get past some of the challenges that we have from a political point of view, which are understandable, and drive some change forward in a constructive way. We have so many reports and reviews done on Northern Ireland about transformation, and there's transformation that could be done that would make such a difference to the population of Northern Ireland. I would love the opportunity to do that, and I think it might take more than a day, but we'll give it a go.
Well, you just put it out there, Owen, so there'll be people listening to this podcast who, may be able to make it happen. You never know, but there we go. So, which decade of music is best, Owen, in your opinion?
Probably late 70s, early 80s.
All right, okay. Anything particular stand out?
Well, I'm probably a bit more into rock music. I'm a bit more into rock music. So a couple of the bands that I would mention, maybe you wouldn't have heard of, or other people mightn't have heard of. There's a band called Horselips, an Irish Celtic rock band. absolutely magnificent. Google them, Mark. Freddie Mercury, a massive fan of Freddie Mercury. The greatest performer ever, in my opinion. And Bruce Springsteen and Van Morrison.
So what lesson have you learned the hard way, and how would you help others avoid that mistake?
I don't know about the hard way. I think the lesson I've learned most, and probably learned it a lot in the last year, it's about communication. You can have all the views in the world, and you may well be right, but if you don't bring staff and teams with you, you don't get very far very quickly in the likes of health and social care. And we've all had situations, I suspect we've all had situations in the last 18 months where we've had to make decisions on the hoof and make them quickly. And sometimes teams have been left behind in that, and that takes a lot of fixing afterwards. So I suppose the lesson I've learned is you need to communicate often and regularly and quickly to keep people on board through the challenging times that they've had. And that's a lesson, I think, for any time, not just during the pandemic, but just became a bit more emphasised by the pace at which we had to operate during that pandemic.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. What's the proudest moment of your career so far?
I've had so many. I would say that the moments of greatest pride is when you see something that you've been involved in has made a difference, a significant difference to an individual or to a team or to a population. So I'm 30 odd years now in the public sector, be it in finance or in education or in health. And I suppose, yes, I live in Derry. I drive past my local hospital every morning at 7:15 on my way to work, and it's Altnagalvin Hospital in Derry. And I played a part 20 years ago in drafting the business cases that have now developed into the refurbished Altnagalvin Hospital. So I do take pride in that as I drive past every morning. I played an early part in that, developing those business cases. As you know, Mark, it takes years to get the various phases of a business case done, but the North Block was recently opened last year, and I was involved in the business case for that 17, 18 years ago. So I have pride in that. But I think, for example, on Saturday, I was at an event with our Chief Medical Officer from Northern Ireland attended it, along with the lead for the regional vaccination programme, Patricia Donnelly. And we'd set up this event in anticipation of the closure of our mass vaccination centre. But then JCVI came out with the announcement last week to expand that further for the 40 to 49-year-olds, and as well as second doses for 16 and 17-year-olds. So the CMO has asked the Trust, and I'm the lead director for vaccination for the Trust, to maintain that for another period. But we decided to go ahead with the event anyway, to thank staff and and encourage them to stay with us and stay involved in that, back to that communication issue. And I have to say I took great pride in being involved in that event on Friday, or Saturday rather, and the engagement that the teams had, and indeed how supportive and how grateful the likes of our Chief Medical Officer from Northern Ireland was, Professor Sir Michael McBride. So it really was with great pride that I was involved in that. Our vaccination programme, for example, we've delivered in excess of 310,000 vaccines so far of the various types of dose, first, second, third and boosters. But that involved teams from all across the Trust. We have vaccinators from all across the Trust, be they nurses, AHPs, midwives, etc. But we also have estates teams, we have admin teams, we have ICT involvement, and pharmacy, of course. And the likes of that involvement, and to be a leader of that group and have the title of lead director, whereas me's constantly just asking people for more, if I'm being honest. But people have really stepped up on all sorts of and delivered on all sorts of asks in the last 18 months, and vaccination is an example of it. So I have great pride actually to be a senior executive in a health service organisation, because our staff have been absolutely amazing in the last 18 months. So that's what makes me proud.
Oh, fantastic answer. Thank you, Owen. Listen, I've really enjoyed this conversation, Owen. I've really enjoyed hearing about your year ahead, reimagining the future. I'm really excited to support you and be part of the finance community in reimagining our future together. And as part of that, redesigning and reimagining the way HFMA works to support us in the future as well. So really excited about that. Owen, thank you so much for your time and all the best for the year ahead.
Thank you, Mark. I'm really looking forward to it. I think we have a massive opportunity. We have a brilliant organisation and we have a massive and brilliant group of members. And I think together we can certainly drive forward in the next year and solve a lot of these issues together. So thank you.
Thank you. And to everyone listening in, thank you for choosing HFMA Talk. If you're enjoying listening to this In Conversation series, please do spread the word, as well as subscribing to HFMA Talk on your podcast app. And if there's anyone that you'd like me to have a conversation with, then do get in touch via policy@hfma.org.uk. But until next time, stay safe, keep well,